Happy Friday night to everybody out there. Josh here with On the Wrong Lean. Not On the Wrong Lean, what the heck? Joined as always by Mr. Matt Carlson here. Another episode of You've Got to Be Sha Tinning Me. Um, Maybe I was just thinking about this race where I was kind of leaning, watching this last race at Turfway, even though my horse was way the heck out of it. But Matt, how you doing, man?
Doing all right. Doing all right. Happy Friday night. It's what better way to celebrate than capping some racing for tomorrow or Sunday morning. But
Yeah, it's it's we were talking a little bit maybe a couple weeks ago about how just like crazy the schedule gets around New Year's, where they start changing days and things. Over the in the spring and sometimes early in the meet, they'll have an occasional what for us ends up being like Sunday morning or Sunday night or Friday night here and there for holidays and things like that. But yeah, we were just kind of like, do we try and jump in with some of these other things, But it's good to be back to Saturday night. I will say that on New Year's Eve after midnight, my wife and I were being degenerates, and we were just sitting there. We were drinking some champagne. We made fondue. So my wife has got this like fondue recipe that she found. So eating just fondue and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the races and she's like I'm gonna send you $50 and put a couple bets in for me. So we were firing at the races. She was just like sitting. I mean, she likes to pick names, so she was sitting there picking names, and yeah, we probably played the first 5 or 6 races before going to bed. So it was a fun New Year's. I think I cashed one decent bet that I think it was like a trifecta or something in the first or second race. It was pretty chalky, but I think it paid $18 and I had it for 10. So it paid for my night of gambling, paid for my wife's gambling as well because she proceeded to lose, said $50 pretty quickly. But yeah, how did you end up doing New Year's? Was that the pick three you hit?
yeah. Actually, I did hit the late pick three. So for anyone listening, finally we actually gave one out. So those last three races were good. I mean, they weren't anything kind of out of the ordinary, but I actually hit a couple Bs, but the Bs were prices enough to make it pay. I think it paid about 110 bucks to one, or I think I had both the first and the consolation, so I think I had it for a couple bucks. So made somewhere between 200 and 300 on that. I think the imbibing on New Year's and then playing after the ball dropped on my own on my couch, those plays weren't so good. So definitely was kind of happy to get some money back when I woke up a little bit later that day. But I think it always seems like a good decision when you're sitting on your couch, a couple drinks in, being like, oh yeah, I got this race pegged, and didn't have too many of those pegged. So some of the Twitter picks I was giving out, those long shots haven't been doing so well. But hey, you only need a couple 20 to ones over the course of the season to make it right. So that's
Yeah,
how I justify it, right? So
yeah.
various.
I think last year I was positive at Hong Kong, and I think one of it was a try I hit for $1, and I think it paid $1,800. And it was just like I was like,
Yeah.
oh, it just takes one. So it's definitely possible. And I mean, it was just like the dumbest bet, right? It was just I think a 3 horse box or something like that, um, or it was stacked where like it was like 2 by 3 by 3 or 2 by 3 by 4, something like that. It wasn't, but the long shot ended up coming in first, and it just paid boxcar. So when you get those big fields, you get the payouts, and I think that's really what helps with Hong Kong is just the field size, right? This isn't Aqueduct. We're not getting these 6 horse fields. I I think man, was it Wednesday where there was it looked like there was a bridge jumper on the first or second race at Aqueduct, and he was off the board. Second choice was off the board, and I think I said something in chat like, "Oh man, these payouts are going to be bonkers." And like the horse that won, that was like 13 or 14 to one. I think only paid $8 to show. It was just like it's like, oh well, I guess when there's only 6 horses, even when you do get a bunch of show money in on one horse, like it's still not going to really pay much. But um, yeah, I mean, Turfway's the same way. You get those big field sizes. Good luck figuring Turfway out. We obviously have friends that can figure it out and do a much better job at figuring it out. But yeah, I mean, just those field sizes that just amplify the payouts. Um, we were talking a little bit beforehand. I know, Matt. I think you're in the midst of your dry January. So what better time to talk about beer than right now? I'm also, well, I'm not saying it's dry January, but I'm definitely cutting down quite a bit with some health stuff and other things. Just taking it easy. Maybe once a week I'll imbibe. I don't have anything today, but we were talking a little bit because I was wearing my Goose Island hoodie here, and I was telling a story about we went to Goose Island and ended up spending like I don't know, it's just some obscene amount of money. I think it was like $500, and it was just yeah, like we ended up buying just like some of like the most expensive beer you could probably buy from a brewery, right? There's I wish I could play the meme of oh man, Vince McMahon, where he's just like, talking about the craft beer scene from the like mid to late
The
2000s
people
to
waiting in line around the block.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's just so funny. But yeah, I know you like we were telling that story, and then you were like you'd gone to you just like gone to like some like random spot, and they just had like Bourbon County on tap, and you're just
It,
like looking around. You're like, no one knows what this is.
Yeah, back in the day, there used to be I forget what they even called it, but like Goose Island would publish like at least where I am, the 6 or 7 bars in the state that would get kind of the pours, and they rotated them around. So one was about 10 minutes from my house, so I'm like, okay, we'll go down, we'll check it out. They had they were getting some of the decent stuff, and I think they had back when it was a big deal. They had Bourbon County coffee on tap, so I'm like, okay, we'll go down there. I'll have a few. I'm sure it'll be bunch of guys with flannel on, neck beards, and be lines to get the stuff. I'll get my couple boards and go home. And then I got there and nobody else was there, so of course I do the what any good beer nerd would do, and I said it would be irresponsible of me not to drink all 5 gallons of this. And so I was paying my $17 a pour. I think I had 5 or 6 pours, and I will thank my wife for however she got me home, because I don't remember it at all. The beer was definitely outweighing the coffee in that case. And woke up with a lighter wallet and a heavier head. But those are days that I can't really do anymore. I think I'd probably get through maybe 1 or 2 of those pours and kind of be in the same state. But yeah, this was back in the heyday of beer, when it felt good to chase those things around and have to say, hey, I can't get this anywhere else, or it's not going to be available outside of this one night. So let's imbibe as much as we can, because it's not going to happen ever again probably. So yeah, miss
Yeah.
those days a little bit, but sometimes not.
I think I've shown you I think pictures every once in a while of my where I have my beer and the big like we don't have Total Wine here, but we have a local chain called Binny's, and it's basically the Total Wine. So similar thing, right? Just a huge warehouse type thing with all kinds of liquor, and people come over and they're like, "Your house looks like Binny's." Like you literally got the wire racks out with just and yeah, we have 2 wire racks out of just beer, and obviously we don't buy like there's IPAs are probably the only thing that we buy on the regular, and that's just something fresh. My wife likes IPAs. I'm more of a pale ale or a hazy type person. I prefer that versus the super hoppy stuff, but she's just like hit her in the face with a hop cone, like she just
Hmm.
wants as much as possible, which is funny because she doesn't like bitter things, like Campari. She does not like Campari. She hates it.
Really?
Yeah,
Hmm.
I made her a Jungle Bird once, which is my favorite cocktail, and she's just like, "This is awful. Like, what? Like, are you trying to poison me? This is terrible." I'm like, "You like hops, and the hops are bitter." She's like, "This is just terrible. Like, what is this?" So, but you were talking about when you were telling me that story about you show up at a place and you're like, no one's drinking this. I remember one time I was at, and this is before I was in horse racing. I was at this OTB in Villa Park, called, I think it's called Crazy Pour, and it's just like a bar, but they have an OTB there. And I just happened to be, we just happened to go there after work one day, and they just have Bourbon County on tap. And like I'm like looking around, right? Because this is no joke. This is probably like 15 years ago. This is probably 2010. No, it's probably 14 years ago, about 2010, 2011, something like somewhere around there. And when this is like the heyday of this stuff, and I'm like, no one's drinking this. Like, do people know what's on tap here? And so I had like two or three of them. And we went to this place called Whirly Ball, which is this thing where it's like you drive a
Bumper
bumper
car,
car.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so Whirly Ball, and same thing. Like they had Bourbon County on tap. I'm like, what is the world like? Do people not know what's on tap? Like you can't find this anywhere. And so, but it leads me to another funny story. So when I first, like I said, really got into beer, turned 21. So that was what, 2007, I think. Yeah, 2007. So, craft beer was just kind of starting to, ramp up right around then. And there was this bar that I missed dearly. It's called Brixie's. It was in Brookfield. And it was just this total dive bar, but they had 24 taps, right? And back then, it was like some of the craft stuff in Chicago, like Goose Island, was obviously still was big. I don't think Revolution was around yet. Two Brothers, which is another big Chicagoland brewery that's been around for a long time. But then they would have a lot of imports. They would have stuff like Delirium Tremens, which is a really, really nice Belgian beer. They would get, Left Blonde, and, just all kinds of Belgian stuff, just all kinds of stuff. And like this wasn't a thing, right? Like places didn't have 24 beers on tap. But then they also had $2 Rolling Rocks, and they had shots of Malort, right? Which, if you're from Chicago, you know what that is. If you're not, make sure you run out and buy yourself a bottle of Malort and do a shot. Um, and But like I said, it was like a total dive bar. Like had a couple pool tables, had pinball machines and stuff like that, and it was a really interesting spot because it was also a 4 a.m. bar, right? So we had Brixie's rules, right? My buddy Tim used to come up with these. Rule number one: you never close down Brixie's on a weeknight. And it's funny because I closed down Brixie's 3 times on a weeknight, and each time was just a disaster. Not necessarily like I was just like wasted or whatever, like just like something stupid happened, right? Like I there's just all kinds of stories. But we had a bunch of rules for this place, whatever. But it was really interesting because it was a 4 a.m. bar, so after two, like it just everybody who was anybody would just show up there because it was the only bar open. It was a dive bar, and it was like a locals bar, and they had $2 Rolling Rocks. So people who just wanted, right, I'm gonna get a PBR or a cheap beer, or whatever, would roll in there. And then you got, at the time, hipsters, right? The craft beer nerds. Everybody would start going there because they had craft beer. They had 24 taps, right? It was just incredible. So at some point, we're playing I was playing in a band with my buddy Tim, and we were able to play. We got asked to play their like an anniversary show there. And so we're sitting there, we're playing, and we're like the first or second band, right? We played jazz fusion, right? I think because we were regulars there, they asked us to play. I don't think they knew what they were getting themselves into, because I don't think anybody wanted to listen to what we were playing, let alone, I mean, I don't even think the people that we brought wanted to listen to what we were playing. But they supported us anyways. But we wrap up playing, and we're sitting there, we're just drinking, and all of a sudden, we're just sitting there and we're like looking around, and like the place is just packed, but like it's a different kind of clientele than we're used to seeing, right? It's like older people, at the time, like people like in their like late 40s, early 50s, and I was in my mid 20s at this time, so you're kind of looking around, and I turned to my buddy Tim. I'm like, I like 'cause this was their anniversary thing, so they brought out every single barrel aged beer they had, all these kegs they had saved up. They had a Randall, right? So they were randling kegs through like vanilla and stuff like that. So like right, they just I mean they brought out all the stuff. Every single heavy hitter type beer that was distributed in Chicago was there, and different vintages and stuff. And like you start looking around and you're like, I don't think these people are used to drinking this kind of beer. And sure enough, we're just sitting there and you just hear thud. You fucking turn around. Guy literally was just sitting on a bench on a stool and just fucking tipped over. Next thing you know, thud. Another dude just falls over. No joke, dude. Like 4 or 5 guys just sitting on bar stools, just fucking falling over because they're thinking they're drinking Bud Light over here. And I think they were. I asked the bartender, who was my buddy. He's like, "Yeah, dude. Like they slammed like 5 of these things. Like they were like, can we get this in like a regular glass?" And we're like, sure, we're gonna have to charge you double for it. And they drank 3 of them and they were gone. It's like, but man, the just like it was such an interesting place because like I said, it was just a total dive, locals place, but like the beer nerds knew about it. So like we would flock there because they had the beer, but like you'd get people who had no idea what was there on tap. And yeah, we had a couple people who just weren't able to handle Brixies at what ended up being like 8 p.m. that these people are just falling off chairs. So that barrel aged beer will catch up to you pretty quickly there.
Sneaks up
So
really quick. Mhm.
yeah, yeah, I've definitely. I mean, have you done Fobab before?
I don't think so.
No,
No.
that's the Festival of Barrel Aged Beers. It's a beer festival here in Chicago. Look at if you're ever able to get out here, I'm telling you, man, it is absolute insanity. It's every single brewery that knows anything about barrel aged beer brings their stuff. There's like it's medals awarded and stuff, and we did it one year, and it was just insane. It was so cool and just like all kinds of weird stuff, right? Because now, obviously stouts and stuff like that, but people are doing sours, wine barrel stuff, all this. It's really really cool. But yeah, like just like the heyday of all that stuff, doing all those events. I mean, like you know, we do the Goose Island. Oh, what is it? Prop day that they have, and like it really does feel like just like a like a bygone thing. Like it's just like there's like nothing like it, you
I
know.
I miss I miss what beer festivals used to be. Those things used to be the place where like you could get breweries you'd never otherwise get, or they'd bring out
Hmm.
their rare stuff. And then at some point, it turned into just like the same, 4 or 5 big name commercial vendors bringing the same, same stuff you could get in a liquor store. Like,
Yep.
I don't need a sample of Twisted Tea. Um, no offense to
Yeah.
anyone who likes Twisted Tea, but like it's now at some point that was a very drastic shift. And so better for my liver maybe that happened. But I do miss the old school beer festivals. So it sounds like I do need to make a trip out there. Fun fact: I've never actually been to Chicago other than the airport, so that'll put it even higher on the list.
Yeah,
Not that I
man.
wasn't already up there. So
There's just a ton of good beer, and it's funny because I mean, we probably spent way too much time talking about beer, but um, with those events, like early on, there was this big event that they used to have at Soldier Field, and it was like called like the Chicago Beer Festival or something, right? Some real generic ass name. And so, but we're like, oh, that's fucking cool. We'll go to Soldier Field, get to try these beers, and like then you go and you're like, okay, Blue Moon is here, Shock Top, like like the stuff, and like at the time, right, Goose Island was there, but it was either right around the time they get bought, and they're really weird. Goose Island is because they, and if you ever see them at a beer event, you'll even see sometimes they split up. They have their production stuff, and then the brew pubs make their own beer as well. So you'll see like Goose Island Clybourne. Well, R.I.P. It's no longer there anymore. But they used to like have their beers, and then Wrigleyville used to have a Goose Island. That one is also gone. But they would like they had their brew pub brewed beer. Then they'd have their production stuff. Then obviously they'd have like Bourbon County and stuff like that. But yeah, like you started going to these things, and then you started realizing like, oh, like this is stuff that you can buy at the grocery store. But back then there were breweries that were making stuff for that one event. I remember I went to this Stout Fest at Goose Island, and Haymarket Brewery, which is a brew pub in Chicago. They made this cherry stout that is still probably one of the best beers I've ever had. They legitimately made it for the event. That was it. They made a couple of kegs for the event. That's all they did, and it was so good. And it's just like it was just so cool to have those like one-off experiences that like you're just never going to have that beer again. Like
Yep.
the only time you could have is you went to this event, and you would go to these events not knowing what was going to be there. We did Stout Fest at the last one they did at the Goose Island Clybourne this last fall. No, maybe it was a spring. It was this past year sometime. But we did this, and yeah, like there was just all kinds of cool stuff, and like just like breweries you never even heard of, and things like that. And it was just like like I said, it used to be like every couple months there would be a different like festival and stuff like that. And now like I don't know. It's gone by the wayside. Whiskey's the new big thing, and that's starting to go nuts as well. I feel like craft beer's kind of falling to the wayside. I think it's just more of a correction than anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I think even talking about those days, there was a lot of bad beer that was readily available at both at both a bar and or retailer for very very long. So beer has never been better, but
Yeah. There were a bunch of guys like me who thought they could open a brewery. That's why I
hey,
took six steps back there, and I knew, I was smart enough at least to know my limitations. So
that's always my fallback plan, right? I hit a couple of Strom pick fives over there. Maybe I'll
best of
open up
luck.
one of those, right? Um, but yeah, let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this. Oh, there we go.
I
Let's take
gotta,
a look
I
at.
gotta. While we get that up, I have to say thank you for spending 20, 25 minutes talking about beer. We also mentioned that I can't drink for the month, or I'm not
Hey,
drinking for the month, so it's a good way to good way to
day
start.
five.
Day five.
Day
Let's just talk
five.
about beer for 25 minutes. That's
Look
good.
at we're talking about the good old
Hey,
days, right? Which is 2023.
six
When you
days
could
ago.
drink. Um, but yeah, it's oh man, yeah. Well, I'll have to send you some stuff because I have entirely way too much over here. I will delay a little bit, but I got some interesting stuff lying around still. But yeah, we got this is interesting. Is this the first dirt race that we've had? All
I think
weather track
so.
race? Yeah,
Maybe. I don't know. At least the one
yeah.
we're talking about, I think. So yeah.
So yeah, so we're gonna start with a all weather race here, which is just a dirt track, and you know we got a pretty big field here. Um, looks like we got a field of 12, and yeah, you kind of were looking at this one. You're like, there's only one horse that's really bred for the dirt here. So where did you kind of land?
Yeah, I mean, I think I love one horse in here. I think there's a couple horses that have, some pretty okay dirt pedigree. I think the one that sticks out to me is the five. D, the five is self improvement, right? I think um, a lot of horses here, because they don't run dirt races all that often, just aren't bred for it, right? You have a ton of turf horses. You don't have a lot of dirt sires. And I think, even on Twitter, I think a couple weeks ago, there's a horse running a couple races earlier um, that, just it had never run on dirt or had one run race on dirt, but it was out of the sire Deep Field. And I think Deep Field is one of the few sires here that actually has a fair amount of dirt pedigree. Like you look at it and it, kind of hits at that, 20-25% mark on dirt. Um, and that's what the five's coming in with. So, it's sired by Deep Field. That screams dirt pedigree to me. It's run on the dirt 4 times. It's hit the board all 4, right? It's got 1 win, but there's really not anything else in this field, I think, that has any sort of, dirt ped whatsoever. So to me, that's the one that sticks out. It's drawn well. The last couple of all weather races, it was drawn way outside. So, it gets a better post. For that, I think similarly, that's the reason I'm not on the 9, right? The 9 has also some decent dirt ped coming in, but it's never actually won, and it's drawn the furthest outside post. It's drawn at that 12 post, so it's just going to get hung out there. So to me, I think it's a single, right? I think to me, if there's one logical horse in here, it's that 5. That said, I think I was telling you, if you ever want to see a price in here, I think because there's not a lot of dirt pedigree, and I think because a lot of these horses don't want to run on dirt, you can get some pretty crazy prices coming in. Things that, just if you want to cap it and say, hey, this horse makes absolutely no sense, but it's 30-1. I think dirt's sometimes the way to play that, because it's a very limited amount of data, right? You'll see horses that only have maybe 1 or 2 races on the dirt. And you can't tell, right? You just don't know. Maybe a horse can take to it. And I've never found anything like trials, to me, never kind of give any indication. They do run a lot of trials on dirt. But to me, I never put too much faith in those, because I don't think horses are really trying in those, right? Like, unless they really, really need to. But they're never really representative of how races are going to go to me. So, I may sprinkle in some B tickets in here with a horse, horses just that, come day of, if you see a huge price, I would probably throw it underneath. But I think most of my money is going to go through just a 5, kind of starting off here.
Yeah, I mean the 10's more than ready, which can run on dirt or turf, but I think you're looking more at miler there, and this is a sprint. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just, when you said that, I started kind of looking up and down, and you see a lot of GB, which surely is not what you're looking for there on the dirt. But I kind of took a different approach. I kind of just went with the horses. I think that in good form. Obviously, the 3 Tornado Phantom won last time out at 10-1, and he just got up in nick of time. There did have Zach Pert on the board. Gets a bit of a downgrade here going to at Zenny. But they're running it right back. At a slightly higher weight. But and was drawn way outside. I think it was drawn in the 12 post last time, and is drawn inside here. So a little bit better of a post. I'm guessing this is going to be your favorite. So price wise, I decided to go to the horse that that just missed, which was a 6. Call Me Dandy. Gets the bug, 5 pound allowance here, and so it's gonna be carrying less weight than last time. And like I said, just missed by a neck. So maybe that 5 pounds is gonna make a difference in this case. I know it's a shorter distance. I think weight tends to make more of a difference. Going a little bit longer. Is also drawn inside. Kind of sat that stalking trip last time out, but did kind of have a little bit of trouble at the start. Got bumped a little bit. Just missed. So sometimes like I look at those like little bit of trouble, right? And you don't think too much of it, but when the horse only loses by a neck, I mean it doesn't necessarily take a lot to affect just losing by that. So maybe with a cleaner start here, gets a little bit of an allowance, maybe can turn the tables over the 3 here. So I got the 6 Call Me Dandy as my A, and I got the 3 Tornado Phantom as my B.
Nice. Now's a good time to mention, I think, too, Zach is on a holiday break. So if you see him hopping off any of these horses, don't look too much into it, because he's not here. And so same with James McDonald. Actually, James McDonald is gone. I think I brought it up last week. That was his last, kind of stint till later on in the season. And then Zach's not here, so maybe another reason that you're going to catch some prices here is that the best jockeys aren't actually riding on Sunday. So we get kind of Karis Teeton and some of the B tier. So
Well, I will say, if Zach's not around, one to look out for is going to be Hugh Bowman. I think with Morera gone, Hugh's kind of the second guy. Pretty clear, I think, second guy there. And with Zach out, his mount, the one um, lightning bolt, lightning bolt. Okay, I mean, maybe someone will get that. I don't have any tennis balls, but um, with lightning bolt here, seems to be a little bit off form. Is still carrying a high weight in this case. Is going to be on the rail, but this horse does have two wins over the all-weather track. Is got a pretty fair record. Is half the time in 16 starts, 8 times in the money. So I think this is a horse that's got a pretty decent all-weather record, right? You got to go back a bit to find it, but and it has been running at Happy Valley. So price dependent play. I'll put a C down for this horse. This is definitely a horse that was a little bit interesting. If you see this horse for some reason, creep up to a large price, I think this will be worth it. But I don't have. I haven't looked at the odds board for any type of early betting or anything like that. But yeah, who knows? Maybe I'm on the top three choices. Moving on to race 9, and something I did want to bring up a little bit. We talk about, I use the Speed Pro numbers a little bit. Matt, you're kind of creating your own thing,
yeah,
and I know, especially when you look at the PPs that are provided by Hong Kong, you're just kind of given sectionals, you're given come home times, things like that. You're given running lines, things, but when you're creating a figure, you have final times, you have sectional times, like. I guess how are you kind of using that to like how are you, I guess, going about creating a figure? Are you using like part times? Are you kind of, I guess, balancing these out versus how the track's playing? What's kind of your I guess your big theory, I guess, behind the speed figs here.
yeah, and I'll say right. This is something that basically I started to do during COVID, and really, probably do my own thing. So what I'll say here is probably not, someone who's more adept at figure making will probably come in and say the way he's doing it is incredibly stupid, or he's missing this giant thing, right? And so, all of this is kind of my own, homegrown logic, or just the way that my, kind of bird brain can think about it. But I wanted to take it on myself to say, hey, I'm relying on figures from looking at like a DRF or a Briz or anything like that, and I have no idea what goes into them, right? And sometimes I would say, hey, I think this, fig for this track is good, or this track's bad. But I think in, kind of American domestic racing for where we are, it's a lot easier to have that variance, right? You're dealing with a lot of different tracks and a lot of different things. Whereas here, to me, I was like, okay, this will be easy, right? It's just two tracks, right? It's three different surfaces. It's all going to be kind of the same day after day, and that's fine. And kind of as you dig into it, you see some of the nuance and what happens. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about the way that I do it, and then kind of go from there. So, like anything, I think, like you said, right, it starts with kind of that par time, right? It just starts with a time and says, okay, base it on kind of a flat number, right? Base it on what you would expect a race to run, or in my case, I'm kind of saying, okay, what would I expect a winning race for like a class 2 horse to be? And given how often they run at some of those races, some of those are estimates, right? But basically, you're saying, okay, here's what I would expect a winning class 2 horse to be, and set that kind of as a normalized figure, right? Here's the time that I would say that would finish in, right? And if you set that to like say 100 as a par, if a horse is a full second behind that, right, you may take however many points off of that. In my case, I think 5 points or something like that, just for estimate, right? And so it does start kind of with that end time, right? But times get adjusted based on a bunch of different things. Believe it or not, here there's a huge variance between where the rail settings are. If you move a race in or out, generally the way it works is the further out the rails, the faster those winning times will be. So upwards of, like, if you see a rail at C+3, that means the rails are about 30 feet out from the A course, which is right on the quote unquote hedge, right, the rail. Those seconds are usually or those winning times are usually about a full second faster at a mile than it would be on the rail. Why that is, I don't know. And I don't want to say every track domestically does the same thing. And in other cases, it might move the other direction, just based on where they position gates. But at least at Hong Kong, right, I think both for Happy Valley and for Sha Tin, the further out it is, the faster that race will go. And so you have to normalize that back, right? If you were just looking at it and saying, hey, look, this horse runs a full second faster than another horse, well, maybe not. Maybe those horses are actually even. So you adjust back for that. In my case, like you said too, right, you also try to adjust based on that day's conditions. If it's super wet, if the course is running like a bog, some of those times are going to be much slower. You have to basically adjust that back and say, okay, if a track was playing 5% slower than it would be on a fast day, that horse probably, based on its final time, if you were to try to estimate, okay, what would that fig look like on a dry track, add 5% to it. Again, just for kind of normalcy's case, right? And so you start with that part time, and then you make adjustments back and forth based on that. What I also do then is I try and say, okay, what would that fig look like if you ran from the best post and you ran it on the rail, and then adjust it for today, right? And say, okay, a horse ran from the 14 post last time, it ran a certain time. Generally, that means it's going to add an extra, half a second if it's breaking from the 14 post. Now today it's breaking from the 2 post. So if it were running that race it ran that day from the 2 post, subtract time back, right? And say, okay, that fig's going to look a lot better because it's in a more advantageous position, or it's got a little less weight on it today, so it's going to add that fig back. So what I try and do personally is say, okay, what would I think that fig be like under that conditions the horse is running in today? And that's what figures don't normally do. If you bring up a DRF or a time form or things like that, it'll do the track variant, it'll do the adjustment for you, it'll say, okay, here's what we expect those pars to be, and it does it really well. But it won't say, and I think something I don't look at in American racing, was it breaking from a post that's much worse, or does weight factor in an American racing? It usually doesn't. But so things like that. So that's how I try and think about it, at least, to say, okay, what was that time? What should that time have been? And then how do I adjust it back based on the conditions for today? There's other things that you can factor in. I look at pace, but I don't factor pace into the figs. I probably should do that, because I think I'm finding, okay, if a fig looks incredibly high but they ran super fast at the beginning of the race, that speed is going to that final time is going to be a lot better than it would be if they went out super slow. So you do have to look at that and things like that. I think that's probably my next step, and if I were to make an adjustment, what it would be. But right, I mean, I think all in all, just based on what I'm trying to do is say, okay, take that time and then figure out how do you normalize it into something that can compare race to race, quote unquote, normalized amongst all the horses that are running today. So if that makes sense, again, I probably went a bunch of different directions with that, but hopefully at least a little bit of insight into what I'm trying to do when I say, okay, I'm making my own figs, and try to say, okay, who do I think is going to run well today, based on what they ran last time. So
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Um, I've thought of trying to do my own thing. I I just like I've had some ideas, and I think particularly the one that you're talking about is pace. Going back through some of the Speed Pro stuff, right? Let me just pull Speed Pro over here. Let me zoom it in. But race 9, which is the race that we're looking at. Um, as this loads up, when you click on here, you get, kind of the notes, but you get at least an idea of, hey, what they kind of thought the pace was, right? And kind of going back and doing the work, and being like, all right, hey, this is a slow pace, right? And he ran X way, right? Or in from what post, right? And then decide based off of that, did he run better than it looked, worse than it looked, things like that. And um I just haven't had the I guess I feel like what I want to eventually do, like I'm jumping like to like where you're at right now, right? Like you're like, all right, maybe I should start incorporating pace, and I'm like, that's what I want to do right away, and I really think I need to, figure out like how to make a brisnet or an Equibase figure here first before I'm moving on the time form or whatever. But
Yeah, and I will say, right, it's hard because it's counterintuitive when you look at times and how you'd actually like program it in, right? In other words, if a race goes really slow up front, you would say, okay, that favors closers, right? But realistically, like if it goes really slow up front, those closers are going to look, or sorry, if it goes really slow up front, it's going to favor horses on the lead, right? Like you're looking at pace, right? And you're saying, okay, if it's an incredibly slow race, you would expect it kind of be a merry-go-round, right? Horses coming from the back aren't going to get up in time because there's a lot of energy left in that front horse. Um, but it's kind of counterintuitive because the horses that are closing are going to look faster. Those closing splits are going to be shorter because every horse, kind of didn't expend energy, right?
yep,
It's like if you were to run a mile, if you walk the first half mile, of course, your second half mile is going to look really fast. You ran a great 800 split, as opposed to if you were trying to jog a full mile. But that doesn't mean your overall time was any faster, or that you'd actually run that race better, right? You would just, your splits would look better. So,
yep.
how do you adjust for that? And that's just something that, again, to me, I'm sure people that do modeling and can program this in and are actually betting big money on this do a lot better job of it than I do. But part of the reason I think why I haven't actually programmed that in, and I just sort of use it as a variable to say, okay, compared to the class, how fast did this race actually go up front? Those first two splits, was it something that was average? Was it above average? Was it below average? And then factored then when I say, okay, I'm seeing a horse that looks like it ran really fast, right? The fig jumps off the page, um, and then they don't run back to that because they don't get that setup again. So
I
it's
will
hard.
say I will say that if you are diligent, and let's say you don't have the analytical analytical maybe is not the right word, but you don't have the technical skill, right, to build a model or to do some Excel magic or whatever to create some type of figure. Um, if you ever watch just a simulcast show, they tell you, they're like, okay, the first they'll right after the race they do the recap. They tell you how the sectionals were, if they were faster than how far off a standard they were. They tell you about the final time, how far. I mean, you could sit there literally with a notepad and just write down this stuff just from watching the simulcast. And they give you so much information that even if you just like want to sit there, watch, rewatch the races, take your notes, and have that, keep a journal or whatever, have that in your head for, hey, this horse is running back, and you can look, hey, last time this horse ran back, the sectionals were much slower, and you could kind of just like kind of like I said, like you're kind of doing right now, Matt. You're just kind of making a variable with that, right? Like seeing how that the pace ended up showing up. But like even if you're not, like I said, you're not using the API, you're not pulling everything down. Like if you want, like they give a lot of this information off on the simulcast show. It's very helpful. There's actually a ton of video content out there for Hong Kong. If you want to see, like their preview show is pretty in depth. They have good interviews. They and they're very much like there's a standard where like they have to be honest in an interview. Like they really want this to be as fair as possible for the bettors. So you can sometimes get some good information, watching some of that stuff. But
Yeah, and I mean, I'll say too. I joked when I first started doing this. I worked for a long time trying to get something that was useful, and I felt like I created something that was about three-quarters as good as the Speed Pro and Form Guide stuff that you were just bringing up there that they give you out for free, right? So if you want to get 90% of the way there without putting in all the stupid work that I did, that's an invaluable resource. And the fact that they give it out to you like that, again, I think U.S. domestic racing could take a lot from that if they're really trying to get new bettors interested. There's a reason that handles higher here, and I think that's a huge part of it is that the data is free and available and very good for anybody who ever wants to look at the product. So
yeah, so yeah, let's move on. So we talked about speed figures almost as much as we talked about beer, but reason being is race 9. I think you said that you had a horse that kind of, I think, highlighted how you're kind of looking at stuff. But before that, I'll give up my chalk here. I do like the 7 here, Pins Prince. I think this is just going to the old pen and paper handicapping is a horse with a very prominent form cycle here, and he is cycling in the form. Seems to be one that needs a break between races, or needs an every other type. So he should be on the upswing here. Obviously, Zach once again not riding. You get Mr. Edzeni aboard. And he was kind of pulled up last time out. This was a horse that we talked about, I think, last show. Was an AE that I was kind of interested in betting back, but did not draw in. So it gets in here. My guess is going to be pretty short. And I think another horse that's probably also going to be short is this one, Superb Boy. It kind of is off form, so maybe with the dirtied up form, you get a little bit of a price. But once again, you get Hugh Bowman aboard. You get a horse that seems to want to go 1400. Seems to like the B configuration. Is going to get, like I said, the rail's going to be out a little bit further, but they ran him at 6. They ran him at a mile. Didn't seem to really like it. Cut him back, and obviously something went wrong on the cutback. They've obviously had to lay the horse up for a little bit, a couple weeks. So coming here off the layoff is going to be the high weight, but is dropping in class, which I think is also going to be helping this horse, because this horse's last 2 wins were at this class. So you get the same class, you get relatively the same course. And you got a lot of dirtied up form in between. So, maybe people kind of look the other way. Is going to be the high weight here, but it's drawn pretty well. It's drawn on the 5 post. So, I think can sit that stalking trip that he seems to want. So, I really like the 1 here. Like the 7 as well. And Matt, where did you kind of land?
Yeah, I think I talk a lot about I just kind of talked about in the figs, right? Like what I think benefits a horse, right? And generally, when a horse is drawn inside, they run better. When a horse is drawn further out, they have longer to go, so they look worse, right? And part of that here definitely impacts. Okay, how what weight are they at today? What are they coming back to in a form cycle? And so I'm fading the 7 specifically because if you look at its wins, it's been drawn in the 1 post, every time effectively, right? If you look at its last 4 races, 3 are from that rail with Zach. And it's won those races and it's moved up, right? It was in class 4, it had the rail. It drew the 4 posts, it lost, it, moved up a couple pounds. It was on the rail again, it won. It was on the rail again last time, and it didn't look so good. Now it's drawn in the 11 post, so it moves all the way out. And so I think when you see a horse that is, winning, but then also has to now do something that isn't advantageous to it, it's higher in weight and is going to lose that form. So I think, to me, I'm trying to get around that, thinking it'll be short, because again, it's benefited from the draws it's had, and now it doesn't get that same benefit today. So I really like a horse that has the converse of that, where, actually it's a horse we talked about last time on the podcast. It ran just a week ago. Last time it was the 5 horse. Now it's the 4, Blue Marlin. I think I said, hey, I'm a little bit hesitant about this horse because it looked like it was heading the wrong way. And also it drew the 14 post. So it was hard for me to want to take a horse that was drawn way out. If you look at its 3 last races, right, it drew the 14 last time way out, the 12 before that, and the 13 post before that. Those are all horrific posts, right? And it's run actually really well from those bad draws. Now it finally gets inside, right? It finally gets the 4 draw. And I think it showed enough last time to tell me at least that, it wasn't heading the wrong way. It was just a victim of kind of that draw. So to me, I love this horse now, finally, right? I think it finally gets a chance to show what it can do. Drawing a legitimate post, right? Coming back in, and to me is the pick here. I'd be putting a lot of money through this 4. I think it's probably one of my strongest plays of the day, because again, it's finally getting to do what it wanted to do. And oh, by the way, it gets a 4-pound weight break because it looked terrible last time, because it had such a bad post, right? So it benefits both ways from actually drawing inside and getting a weight break now because of it. So, bad luck can kind of turn into good here really fast because of those reasons. I think the other couple of horses that I liked, again, were kind of horses that were a little bit of unknowns. they had shown some things before that, they ran well at the distance, and then they've gone off and done completely different things since then. And so to me, it's like, okay, well, you showed some ability doing one thing, and now you've kind of been put in these other spots. Is it just something where your trainer's been misguided, or conversely, maybe it really doesn't want to do that? But I'm willing to pay to find out. The two horses to me, versus the 13, seizing the moment. Again, we explained before, Zach's off today. There's no James McDonald, so Karis Teeton to me is like the go-to jockey here. Um, and if you look at this 13 horse, right, like it's been running at 1200. It's ran the last two races on the all weather. Um, because of that, right, I think its weight has actually gone way back down. If you look at the last race it actually won, it was in May of 2023. It was at this 1400 on the B course, right? So it won. It had to move up 12 pounds, and then it's been sitting at that huge weight the entire time, and now it's kind of come back all the way back down to 120 pounds in the same class three. So to me, hey, if I can get 120 pounds on a horse that has a win at the distance, right, it's getting back in the right time, wanting to do the right thing. That's always the horse that I want to take here. So I like the 13 a fair bit. Um, and then the 9 as well. I think I was willing to take a chance on it because it's been running a Happy Valley a lot. It's kind of, I don't know why they keep wanting to run this horse at 2 turns and run it at Happy Valley, but um, to me, I was like, okay, the last time it ran at 1400, last time it ran at 7 furlongs was in June of last year. The horse that won that race has gone on to actually run in like class ones and graded races. So that was to me a really strong race. And some of the races before that, I think it's actually showed some pretty good ability going this 7 furlongs. It's just never, for whatever reason, gone back to it. So, maybe a skeptical B on the 9 a little bit in there. So I think I was the 4 and the 13 as A's, probably heavier into the 4, and taking a flyer a little bit on the 9 in case it really wants to get back to the 7 furlong distance.
Nice. And then yeah, we got race 10 here. We're gonna be going 1600 meters, and yeah, we have this seemed like a pretty interesting race to me. You got a lot of winners in here. Obviously, you're at basically the top of the class ladder here before you get into the stakes racing. Obviously you got the one that has run at, Group 3 recently. Class 1, Class 2, um, and is back down here in this Class 2. The 5 obviously is just a win machine. And then yeah, you got a lot of winners here. So where did you kind of land?
Yeah, I think the one, if it runs its race, has this field kind of over a barrel. Funny enough, right? You say it's moved between class 1 and class 2. A lot of these horses actually ran against each other last time. There's a pretty significant overlap between class 1 and class 2. Like you can run between the two of them, and so you see the weights move up and down. But it's kind of weird because, um, you know, every horse ran at class 1 and probably had 5 pounds off, and now they're running in class 2, and they just kind of pick up that 5 pounds, right? Because that's basically what the difference is between the two classes. So don't look too much into moving between those. Once you kind of get into class 2, class 1, and group racing, they're kind of all playing in the same pool. Um, but yeah, I think if you watch the replay of last race, for whatever reason, the horse was sitting back. The track was playing pretty forward that day, and it comes around the turn, and it's literally 9 wide trying to close on a very forward track. For whatever reason, I forget who was on it that day, but the jockey just gets incredibly impatient. And tries to basically make a move way too early and strands the horse way out there, and it runs on pretty well, but not well enough. It just doesn't get there. I'm willing to forgive that race. If just watching the replay, right? I mean, that horse should have beaten that field handily, and so I think it comes back today and kind of beats the ones that I think the 2 actually won that race last time, but it had James McDonald on board and got the dream trip, right? I mean, he hugged the rail, he snuck through on the inside and just stole it. And I don't think that wouldn't happen today, right? Obviously, James isn't here, so to me, it's the 1 very strongly. The couple other Bs that I had, the 11 was in that race. I thought it ran on pretty well. It would maybe be an A if Zach was still riding, but he's not today. And if it wasn't drawn way outside, it gets a terrible draw. So I made it a B, possibly a weak B, but um, I think it did show kind of enough ability and closing in on a track that again was playing pretty forward. So if the one gets a horrific trip like it did last time and moves too early, maybe the 11 can pick up the pieces. Um, the other thing I was trying to look at in this race, I think, was the pace and trying to figure out what that pace scenario would be. And I think if you look at Speed Pro, the four it has the four kind of going out and you know being on the lead. It is drawn inside. I think to me though, if I'm looking at it, I think the three has a chance to um, get out on that four. I think it's a little bit faster early. I don't agree with how Speed Pro has it. Um, is it going to have to expend too much energy getting to the front? Maybe. Um, but I do think the better races it's run have come over a mile, and it's been running at kind of that 1400. It's been running on slow tracks, so if the track's playing forward, if it can kind of break well and get out over that four that's going to be drawn on the rail, maybe it's a pace play, and maybe it can just run them around. And if the track's playing forward again, then to me that would be the pace play that I would want. So I think I was heavy on the one, and then the 3 and 11 is B's for me.
Yeah, I have the one as my lone A. I kind of agree with you. I think this horse has been running against better and running very well. Last time out did get stuck out a little bit wide. Um, so yeah, I really like the one in the spot. I have two other horses written down as a B and a C. The seven Dancing Code. Um, you know, coming in here is stretching out a little bit. And when I was kind of looking at this horse, I mean, this seems to be a Happy Valley horse. It's his two wins in Hong Kong are at Happy Valley. But he's got finished in the money 5 out of 7 times at Sha Tin. This is a very consistent horse. And last time out, once again, kind of had a bit of a awkward start. And kind of just like I said, went out wide, was in the 13 post. One thing I will kind of mention as well. This horse is now drawn in the 12 post, so not exactly drawn inside. This might be one to kind of watch when he does get maybe a more favorable draw, but has run okay being out in the parking lot, and gets a jock upgrade I think here, or at least with Zach not being here, you take the top jock out and everyone else looks a little bit more competent. So I thought Dancing Code was a little interesting in this spot. And then obviously the five Helios Express Wind Machine here. Kind of interestingly campaigned, I would say. I don't think has yet to try this distance. He's got 5 starts here at Sha Tin, and just kind of looking at the progression. Maybe this is John Size's idea. Maybe he thinks he's got, he's got something here, and he's maybe just kind of bringing this horse along slowly, slowly stretching him out. And trying to get this mile distance where there's the 7 furlong, 8 furlong distance. They do have some very big races. Obviously, sprinting is their main thing, but those one turn, slightly longer sprints are big as well. And yeah, I mean, he's just progressively, like I said, kind of moved up into tougher races. Slowly getting more weight, and it hasn't really seemed to matter. So he's kind of showing up every single time. Gets Hugh Bowman aboard, and I've already kind of said he's Zach Purton when Zach Purton's not here. So yeah, I thought he was very interesting in this spot. Is drawn pretty decently. I mean, last time was drawn in the parking lot, and kind of going back to what you said for in last race, his only wins that 2 races he didn't win were when he was drawn out in the 12 post. So now he's drawn back inside in the 5 posts. Is going to get is got a much more favorable draw, and has got a great jock aboard. And yeah, I think he's just going to get a much better trip in this spot. And I think it's really the one and the race to lose. And I think the 5 and the 7 maybe have a shot here to pick it up if the one doesn't fire.
Nice, like it.
Cool. And then, oh, wait. before I forget, is there anything else you liked on the card?
You always ask me this, and I figured I actually had to come up with something. So I'll go one race before, and if anyone's listening that can actually play the pick four, the late pick four, or the quaddy, maybe it's something you can sneak in. But in race seven, that's the group race here. The actually the it's at Sha Tin they run a straight. So Happy Valley runs 5 furlongs along a bend, and Sha Tin runs it on the flat. So a little bit different. But I love these group races because if you look at it, like they do this, there's always one horse that's just drawn like or rated super high, and it has so much more weight than the rest of the field. So like the top three horses are carrying like 130 pounds, and then like 4 or 5 and below that are all carrying like 115, and it's super low. And I feel like it's funny because then they put all these higher rated horses on these posters, and they're like, oh, like they have such a good chance, like they're the superstars, right? And they take a ton of money, and unless you have like a true superstar horse like Golden 60, I feel like there's always opportunity for those horses just to bomb out and lose, right? And so I love playing around those horses. Like I would never play kind of the top horses in this race. I think the one horse that's low weight, it's going to take a lot of money, is Invincible Sage. I don't really like that horse either. The horse I love here is the 6 Seasons Wit. It's only run once on the flat, but I think it might be its best race. And so, getting that super low weight to me, getting back to kind of what it wants to do, maybe. I think that horse is going to have a big shot in here. So I do like a price in that race. Maybe playing it each way. The 6 Seasons Wit in that race leading in. Maybe even double it into the 5. Play something nice cold and try and catch some money coming in. So
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for staying with us on this extended episode of You Gotta Be Shot Tinning Me. As usual, we were able to cover that late pick three, but we gave you a little something else. A little craft beer, a little speed figure talk, and yeah, obviously you can catch us at ontherwronglead.com, at wrong_lead on Twitter. I'm at Cherry Drank. He's at Slow and Steadied. We'll catch you guys later.
best of luck, everybody.